welcome again to today's Expert Talks Online. My name is Lindsay Brewer. I'm a delivery lead with Equal Experts. I'm going to be your host for today's session. Today is the final talk of the year, and it also concludes our series where we're spotlighting various Equal Experts clients. We're really excited today, very grateful to have three members of John Lewis with us. For those that are outside the UK, John Lewis is a major UK retailer that is over 150 years old, and they're going to be presenting this evening. So for John Lewis, Black Friday and Christmas are key business events, and we're going to be learning a bit more about, how John Lewis and partners can get through that critical trading period, and what they're doing to support their systems in that period, and what they're looking forward to in the future to build upon successful key business events. So I'd like to welcome Sandra Christie, Christian Mason, and Alex Moss, who are going to be talking this evening. After their talk, we're going to have a Q&A discussion. So if you've got questions that come to mind during the talk or after the talk, please pop them into using the Q&A widget, and then vote up questions that you'd like to see answered. Right, let's get on. So I'll hand over to Christian now to take it away with the talk. Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you, Equal Experts, for inviting us to come and do this today. Really pleased to be here and do it. Probably one of the first things just to call out is we are John Lewis and Partners. So we refer to our employees as partners because we're a co-owned business. So through the course of this talk, you hear us referring to partners. We're not actually talking about suppliers or clients. We're actually talking about the employees of the business. So I'm Christian, and I lead delivery and operations in John Lewis Digital. I've been with the partnership for just over 4 years now, and what I've done in my time here is really focused on scaling our digital capability, as well as looking at how we can modernize it, and that's really where I spend my time.
Thanks, Christian. Hi, my name's Alex. I have a partner. I've been a partner for a while. I started back in 2004, and I'm not going to think about the maths involved there. These days, I am an engineering lead, the engineering lead for the John Lewis Digital Platform. We're going to spend a little time during this session talking about what that is, what that means. But broadly, I've been involved in that space since about 2015, 2016, and helping move things towards a more cloud-centric view of the world and helping us deploy microservices.
And I'm Sandra Christie. I'm the technical profession lead, so I work closely with Christian. I have the responsibility for the things like engineering decisions, all of the people that then work in the area, the delivery and operations areas into Christian's teams. I'm always embarrassed at this point to admit that I'm actually one of the longest serving partners out of the three of us. I've actually been in the partnership more than 35 years, but I'd like to point out I've had a number of different jobs while I've been in there, but I joined as a Christmas temp, which is kind of relevant actually, and basically forgot to leave is how I like to think about it, but I've had quite a diverse career in the partnership.
Great. So the ongoing theme through this deck is really what we've done from a digital transformation point of view, and how that's really underpinned how we've supported the business through this time of year. And this is our busiest time of year, as Lindsay referenced. And so a lot of the investment we've made has really been about modernizing it, and we'll talk a lot about that through the course of this deck. So being a general merchandising retailer, February to October, that's generally when we, in terms of sales, historically cover our operating costs rather, break even. So this time of year is where we make all of our profit. This year probably will be slightly different due to the pandemic, but historically that's usually where it profiles. Christmas is important for two main reasons. One is because of Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's where we aim to sell a huge volume of goods, usually online, as well as being in store, although this year it was just online. And then the other aspect of it is really around the advert. And so you'll see there at the start, one of the adverts from 2016 was the bust of the boxer, and from 2017 underneath that was the monster that we were talking about at the beginning. This is really important for us because it creates huge media traction, and it goes beyond just the advert itself. We'll find that this is part of the in-store experience, and we produce cuddly toys. My son's first cuddly toy was actually of Moz the Monster, and you can see in terms of numbers, it's pretty good. So on the John Lewis YouTube channel as of yesterday, our current advert was 3.9 million, and that's the second advert that we've done in conjunction with Waitrose, which is the grocer arm of their partnership. So we started that because we wanted to show more collaboration between the two brands. Obviously, the other benefit of it is that every time we show one of these ads, which are incredibly popular, people are seeing them usually in front of a screen, and that can see an uptick in sales because we're hoping that generates some inspiration to go and do some browsing on through one of our digital channels, and hopefully that will convert to a purchase. It's fair to say that a lot of what we've done over the last 4 years in terms of investing in our platform and in our modern architecture has been about sort of like the move to improving the digital experience for our customers, and also the resilience and performance of the site. And we'll come on to that in a bit more detail later on. So, hasn't always been plain sailing for us. We did have in 2016 a legacy platform. We were using Oracle ATG, still have it, to be fair. We're currently migrating away from it. We used to do, I think it was 10 releases a year with 9 teams is what we'd scaled to. And the reason it was 10 releases, not 12, is because we had a change freeze through November and through December. So that created a bit of a challenge for us in terms of, there was a lot of bottlenecks. These monthly releases, we had to do them overnight, couldn't do them during the day. It would take 2 big teams across 2 different countries, UK and India, to go and manage that. Now, during this time of year, if we had any issues, it was a hot fix, and the appetite around making a change was incredibly low because the resilience of the site was at stake. And because we couldn't have many teams, we couldn't really scale beyond that batch release process. We were limited, and so we couldn't really have too many teams making change, which meant we left a lot of value on the table. It was a real, genuine ops team assemble process for about those sort of weeks leading up to our peak trading. We had a war room that was dedicated to it, and we used to take the same poor guy out of whatever project he was delivering at any given time, and he'd have to spend time focusing in on actually going and doing scenario planning with ops. And we picked him because he had quite a good infrastructure background, and so we spent an enormous amount of time doing scenario planning and obsessing over thread counts within servers. And it became a real, and probably one of the biggest issues we had is we had to actually turn off all our non-production environments just so we could be sure that our infrastructure would handle the load. And that obviously had another impact because it meant that we were unable to progress change to a significant period through that time. But one of the interesting things was the CIO and the IT directors really wanted to show active participation during this period. So on Black Friday and during Cyber Monday, they'd come down and they'd huddle around screens with the ops guys, and there'd be lots of talking to teams to make sure they felt like they were involved and had visibility, which is really good because if you're going to make a change and you're aware that the IT directors and CIO will see if it breaks anything immediately, that really encourages you to go and make change and be positive about change. One of the other things was we used to have a really well-attended cab in October, brilliantly attended, because everyone was fighting to try and get space. And it was usually the big super tankers of programs that would get priority, which again meant a lot of the stuff that would drive revenue from a digital point of view would get left behind. But we have been improving. Over the years, that window's got smaller and smaller and smaller. And now we got to a point recent years we just do heightened awareness, and we'd allow teams to make change, and we have been positive steps. And it's fair to say that equal experts have been with us along a lot of that journey. So I'm going to now hand over to Alex, and he'll talk a little bit more about that journey and the modernization we've been doing around our platform.
Thanks, Christian. I certainly remember some of the times you're talking about, sort of before we had a platform like this, some of those experiences of trying to figure out how to weave in changes that we felt we had to make for peak within very restrictive treacle-like processes for deployment and difficult to deliver infrastructure that took, many months. Sometimes, turning off those non-prod environments, for example, was because we didn't know that we would necessarily be able to buy the physical servers we'd need, get them installed in our data centers. It was what feels like worlds apart compared to what I'm going to talk about now, which is the newer platform that we built. So this story goes back to around sort of summerish 2017, a bit later than that, where we knew that we were not being successful in trying to modernize some of the approaches we were taking with our monolith, and that some sort of new approach was needed. We'd already started re-architecting the johnlewis.com application as a whole, and one of the things we wanted to do with the newer stuff we were building was run that stuff in the cloud. And there was a little bit of resistance to that. Established practices that we had already, some improvements were being made in our data centers. And what ended up happening was it actually started really with a small number of engineers who felt really strongly about this. And they got together, they took that application, and we knew that it would probably work because it was built for cloud. We shoved it in a Docker container and we put it on Kubernetes on Google Cloud. We did this, with pizzas and beers at the end of the day because we had other stuff that we needed to be doing. And that went really well. It went so well, we were so happy with it that we went back to stakeholders, we went back to the business and said, this is better. This can do things better for us. We should do this properly. We should form a team around this. And they were good at backing us on that. And that's where it started. It took about 6 months to get that through to production. We were effectively scooping up an incredibly important application, and we chose that very deliberately. We wanted it to be a lightning rod. We wanted to be able to say, hey, look, we've taken this really important thing, the thing that you hit when you go to johnlewis.com, the front end, the browse application, and it's in cloud now, and it's fine. And we've done the operational things, we've done the security things, we've got the sort of governance around that sorted, and lo, it is better. And that worked. We moved the mobile traffic over about 6 months after starting, followed that up with the desktop. And at that point, ATG, certainly from the browse perspective, became headless. And we could then use that as justification to go, okay, we're going to go bigger. And this is where it got really interesting. This is where we were then saying, okay, we're going to actually start building everything out as microservices and run it on this platform in a multi-tenant way. We're going to build something that's scalable. And by that, we mean not just scalable in terms of solving the problems for peak, but also scalable in terms of being able to get teams up and running quickly and give them the tools they need to build things quickly. We were very keen to make sure that engineers felt a sense of agency, a sense of freedom. That's why Docker was chosen, for example, because we wanted you to be able to just run almost anything, programming language-wise, that you could get to run in a Docker container. And then we started to form some opinions on top of that. We started to say, hey, we think this database technology is a good choice, and we think building it and running it this way, building and deploying it this way is a better way of doing things. And if you do it this way, you'll get a bunch of free stuff out of the box that will help you, go faster, do more. However you want to phrase that. We tend to refer to that now as the pay road. That's something we pinched from Netflix back at the beginning. There's a sort of reasonably famous blog post on Netflix's engineering site that talks about that, and it resonated really well with us. This idea that make something awesome that your engineers want to use, and they'll use it instead of having to reinvent the wheel themselves. And that also is quite powerful for us because we then start to treat our own platform as a product and make sure that it stays awesome, that we don't let it just atrophy and fall behind and fall into the trap of having to do some re-platform later because we've taken our eye off it. And that's gone pretty well. We're pretty pleased with how that's gone. We won a couple of awards along the way, which is pretty cool. Good bit of fun, good bit of recognition from that sort of. We sort of started this journey around us about sort of mid 2018 that we were building the new multi-tenant platform. These days we're up to 68 services, 31 teams on the platform, where we sort of started off with just a couple. Along the way, we created some new teams. We sort of morphed some of the existing teams in response to the need to be able to scale. So one small team of about half a dozen engineers wasn't cutting it. So we split out, created a team called Enablement that helps those product engineers get more value out of the platform, while the other team can sort of focus on the core capabilities. Sonic's another team that's well worth a shout, especially when we're talking about Christmas. Their focus, as the name implies, is going fast. So some of that kind of performance work, making sure the website stands up under very high load, and actually helping teams test that stuff themselves, empowering them, building out services that make actually running important services that help the site perform under load, things like caching and page composition and stuff like that. So that's how we scaled in terms of our engineering function and being able to spin up all these extra services, which has gone very well. And it also works for our customers as well, because we're using these modern technology stacks. We're able to, take advantage of things like auto scaling and bring up new infrastructure on demand, explore new capabilities, new ways of doing things. I picked this quote out in the bottom right of the slide, which was from this Black Friday. One of the engineers, actually one of our equal expert engineers, reflecting on an ask to produce some reports on how the performance went, and he was saying, well, nothing special, just 3 times the load, whatever, it's fine. The PlayStation launch was much more interesting, which is totally fair. And even in this year where we've had shops shut, come on to that in a little bit, it's been a BAU kind of year, because things have just responded accordingly. The graph that you can sort of see in the background is an interesting one, because most of those lines, the thicker lines, that's Black Friday traffic. That's the normal stuff that we plan for, that we test against. Those big weird spikes are the new problem that we're looking at the moment. The hot products, the PlayStations, the Xboxes, whether we'll carry on selling things like that, they create different kinds of scale of problem if you reflect on the fact that those lines are way higher, way more bursty, back like Black Fridays of old. So our sort of emphasis has shifted a bit towards looking at those kind of problems, because Black Friday and clearance launch and things like that, they just, it just works now. We don't need those war rooms and those big sessions where everyone's planning for months on end, because we've built something that handles that demand without needing to think about it too much. So yeah, we're really pleased with the new platform. It continues to grow and evolve. One of the really good decisions I think we made early on in building it was actually pushing that responsibility, that ownership, sense of ownership, that mindset into teams to say, what, this is your service. We'll give you the tools, we'll help you make it work, but it's yours. You build it, you deploy it, you run it. And I think that's been very powerful at allowing us to scale out to lots of services and meet that demand for something that's very much more distributed than what we had before. And that's a topic that leads nicely onto our approach to operability. And I'm going to hand back over to Christian to talk a bit more about that.
Thank you. And it's really just worth calling out that the Sonic team that Alex mentions, like some of the best teams, it was born out of pain. So we about a couple of years ago, we had a couple of major incidents that we had, and we were moving into this new modern architecture, a new modern platform, and the CIO said, a bit worried, major incidents, lost some serious money, and what would it take to reverse and go back to ATG and look at that as an option? And so we didn't want to do that. We knew that wasn't right. So like we did with the platform team, with the Sonic team, and this is something that is important to Sandra and I both, which is we like to put our best people on our most difficult problems. It's a real statement of intent. And so we got some of our best engineers in this space who knew about performance, and some of our best leaders in terms of delivery leadership, and we got them to form a team around that. And the results have been stellar, to the point what was supposed to be a team that was going to last for a quarter has now become a core part of how we run and maintain the site, and we wouldn't be without them. So good. So yeah, we used to have a very traditional classic ops model. I use classic rather than legacy, because we've still got that. There's no hiding away from it. We still have that team, although it's in a very different size and shape to what it was a few years ago. So we had quality-based warranty, and teams would make changes, and then after that period of time, it was an ops problem, and then there'd be a run book got out if anything went wrong, and then they'd back out that change, which became even harder at this time of year. But around the same sort of time, as I said, we engaged equal experts about 3 years ago. It's fair to say that their operability practice leads have been absolutely foundational in terms of collaboration, in terms of helping us with our thinking around how we move to modern operability. So I think the first team we had that really did you build it, you run it from an operability point of view was actually the platform team, the JLDP in the top right corner there, which we had a mixture of partners and third parties who were actually involved in saying, actually, we're going to form our own rota and we're going to support this. And Alex was one of the first people, one of the people on that team who was on that rota the very first time. We then looked to scale that out into our search capability, because we decided we were going to move away from our legacy search to a more modern search capability. And then it became a bit trickier. Because then we found actually one of the things that we hadn't anticipated is where we maybe had some not as much strength in depth technically, because we had people who were on their learning journey in that team. Actually, the responsibility for a rota fell to a much smaller number of people in the team, because what we found is that certain people just weren't comfortable saying, I will be on call tonight, because they just didn't feel like they had the technical prowess in order to be able to know I can recover this if I need to. So that prompted us to think about, well, how do we scale this out? And so EE introduced us into the idea of product domain rotas. And so we've really gone down that avenue quite well. And we're still immature, I think it's fair to say, but we do look now in terms of teams where they have familiarity in terms of journeys, in terms of tech stack, in terms of code, how teams can support each other's code. It's had some positives and it's had some challenges. I think some of the challenges we've had have definitely been around trying to get some of our, particularly our partner engineers, to think about actually, why do I have to go and support someone else's work? I'm not sure why I'd want to do that. That feels like an ops role, Christian. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. But that now they realise that actually it means they don't have to be on a rota the whole time, and it's had some really good benefits in terms of collaboration between those teams. So we've been on that journey, and so as you can see, the vast majority of the teams within that now are sitting within that product domain rota, and that spreads across multiple delivery centres. So we use EE Cape Town, we use Bucharest with another supplier, and we use Ukraine and again India with other suppliers. So so that's kind of a mentality that we build in. I'm now going to we want to get on to some good Christmas stuff. So Sandra's going to talk to you about some really interesting Christmas content from this year.
Stop talking, you're going to steal my thunder. That's my intro sentence.
Hey, must be good.
So
I thought about it on the fly.
So I'm the brains behind Christian and I, so I'm just putting that out while he's now not in control of the actual slides. Don't interrupt me. So I am going to be covering some of the more exciting and fun stuff that our product engineers have got into and been involved in for Christmas. Obviously we do other things as well, so I'm going to call out two examples. The first one is a virtual shop, and then the second one is some work that we have done around Christmas, virtual Christmas trees. So Christmas shop, this is I'm not sure how many of you have been to see the site, but I'm going to describe it first. So it's basically, you can go in and it's exactly as if you are walking around within one of our stores, being able to look at all the items that we're selling for Christmas. They're set up in room settings like this picture. You can walk around, and on the website you can hover and you can click on links that will actually take you through to buy those items. So we haven't done anything like this before. Usually we build these, in Oxford Street, our flagship store, we usually build this department and we open it on the first night for all press, and we supply drinks and canapes. It's a lovely social event for the press, and we hope we're going to get very good write-ups about it. And then on the second night we open it up to the public and everybody comes along, and it's all very Christmassy and lovely. However, this year was obviously different. The press office contacted us and said actually it would be great if we could help them to think of a way of getting Christmas out to the press in a novel way, and that's what this is, the site that we actually created. So it's the total development effort for this was actually less than a week. So we used Matterport 3D scan. They came in, we built the departments as normal. Physically, they came in and scanned them all, a couple of hours. We added the SKUs and the coordinates for the actual products so that people could click on those links and actually go and buy them, which was really good. We snuck in some animation and music to make it sound very jolly and Christmassy and make you feel upbeat and spend more money. And we did all of that working very collaboratively with the and closely with the content and design team. So less than a week. There was a little bit of toing and froing around data protection, much as you'd expect, and security with the AEM team, but that was all sorted. We pulled in a favour and managed to get a surprise banner onto the homepage of the website and went live. And we got some great press coverage. You can see that in the grey box on the bottom right. I particularly like "This is genius." I think that says it all. That one always makes me have a real warm feeling about it. because it was exciting for the people involved, you know, and it was short and sharp and great returns. So the average order value and the conversion rate is very similar to the Christmas page, the main Christmas page that we have. And to date, well, a week or so ago, we had 1.3 million visits to this page. So it's definitely been worthwhile doing that. My assistant, Christian, is going to move on to the next slide now. At this rate, he's going to be moving me backwards in the slide deck. But anyway, this is our virtual Christmas trees. So this is also another thing that we, it's not, this one related less to the COVID aspect, but more to the fact that we have an issue with Christmas trees where people buy them online, take them home, put them all together, and then discover they don't like them, they don't fit in their room, whatever it might be. And we have relatively high reasonable returns on Christmas trees. So I have a great deal of sympathy for this. I went out on the weekend and bought my real Christmas tree, loved it, perfect height, brought it home. It's the bushiest tree I've ever seen in my entire life, and everybody in our house is now having to sort of shimmy around the outside of it to get into the room. So if that had been a false Christmas tree, then obviously I would probably have returned it. Anyhow, at the moment, I'm loving that. So we wanted to really explore if we could use AR to help with that issue of people visualizing what it would be like to have the tree in their house. So we developed an idea, and the iOS team worked with the digital assets team to bring this idea together, because very conveniently, we already had quite a lot of this functionality already. We used it for visualizing your sofa in your room, which was something we put out earlier. And so we basically have been able to create this very easily, very cheaply. We've piggybacked the work in on the back of the other team's work that were doing sofas, and used used a lot of their code and also their money. So that was even better. We created digital images of trees with and without decorations. A couple of weeks to develop it from beginning to end, and we used the reality version of the Apple's AR kit. Luckily, both sofas and trees use the horizontal face, so again, we could use more reuse. And we just had to add the extra dimension for trees, which would have helped me in my real tree shopping, which was the diameter. The color function was already in place as well, because we used that for the sofas. That's how we managed to add the decorations to the trees, so people could actually see what it would look like with their, possibly their decorations on it. It's gone really, really well. We've got more than 37 trees enabled on the site. We've had over 20 press articles. They've all been really positive, things like Good Homes, the Telegraph website. Weirdly enough, we've also had one in the New Zealand News site, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure we don't deliver to New Zealand, but they are also very impressed with our virtual trees. And a few stats which I picked up, which I always am totally fascinated by these. We've had over 34,000 page views. The app year on year for tree orders is up by 235%, and revenue is up 253%. And the visitor conversion rate is 74% higher when AR is actually used. So for a 2-week piece of work, which really wasn't even on the work plan, I think has had some pretty amazing responses for that. And also it's fun. It's the type of thing we want our product engineers to feel empowered to be able to do, to suggest these things and to really bring those ideas to life, as opposed to always being focused on the things that are on their backlogs and stuff. So it's great. Buy your virtual Christmas tree. I'm handing back to Christian, I think.
You are. So content planning for this time of year, as you know, Sandra says, we've done some really good ingenious things this year, I think, particularly around the virtual Christmas shop and also the Christmas tree AR. But it's always a big deal on the website. We normally start thinking about Christmas on the website around July. The planning for the ad usually happens at the start of the year, so we'll start thinking about next year's ad in the next couple of months. And it's essentially a site takeover. So, you know, if you go onto the John Lewis website, it feels different to any other time of year. There's a lot of content that's related to Christmas. You'll see a lot of mapping back to the Christmas ad, and the styling of it changes. Even to the point where we change the top line nav, and so we'll have Christmas and gifting as first and second place. And when you go in there, we have some really useful filters for you. So if you want to go on there, you can choose actually what's the gift value I want, and by who are you buying that gift for, in order to help you in terms of your browse journey, and you know, again, to really help drive people in terms of that shopping experience at this time of year. We also have gift guides, which are really useful in terms of driving inspiration, particularly useful for people like me. Otherwise, Mrs. Mason would be ending up with a third spiralizer to go in the back of the cupboard with the other two at this time of year. And then we've done some really interesting stuff this year specifically though with content using Adobe AEM. So this year we've really got into content as a service. And so some of the stuff we've done is that the customer iOS apps for the first time are able to use exactly the same content as the website. They don't have to recreate it, which has been a really, really big time-saving thing for them, and great for consistency as well. And we've done some really fun stuff. So we've got responsive, reusable animation that works anywhere on the website that we've been able to put in place, which is obviously really relevant because we've got our Christmas ad this year, and I do encourage you to go and look at it on YouTube if you haven't already. Has quite a bit of animation in it. So some really good stuff we've been doing around that. So this was a slide I was really struggling to write actually. So how do you make a good news story out of a pandemic? It's hard, right? 2020 was the year that nobody saw coming, including us. We've closed our shops twice. When we've done scenario planning and disaster recovery planning in the past, we plan for certain things. So, you know, Oxford Street, what if that shut for a long period of time, or we couldn't go into the head office anymore? What if the website went offline for a period of time? We never thought really about what would happen if we had to shut all of our physical estate, and we had to do it within days. And that's the situation we found ourselves, like everybody else, in this year. I genuinely believe that if it hadn't been for the investment that we've made in terms of the platform that Alex was talking about, and more modern architecture that we've been working with and working very closely with equal experts with, we wouldn't have coped the way we have, and we've coped brilliantly. We've had very few incidents throughout the whole of the summer, and even during the second lockdown actually, and that's done under a profile where for most of the summer we were seeing load that was the same or slightly beyond what we were seeing at Black Friday in 2019. And 1 year this summer, we actually, year on year, total trade was higher than a day last year. That's with all the shops shut. That's the level the website was performing at, and it was doing it beautifully. And so I think that's a real testament to the work that we've put in place and what we've done. But it doesn't change the fact that lockdown this time of year, with all the and then having to have, you know, peak at the same time, it is different than it is in the summer. You know, we're expecting more, so we've had to be more careful. So when I looked at that criticality, when I looked at that operation chart that I showed you before, we've moved some of those services up the left-hand side, so they've increased in importance because we've looked at them and said, actually, rather than being, you know, a model where actually only about half of our trade is online, where all of it's online on Black Friday, maybe we want to recategorize things and we want people to be around a little bit more than they would be otherwise. And that's prompted some really good, healthy questions as well. We've asked some teams that maybe wouldn't normally be on support to be eyes on and just to be a little bit more, you know, involved, and to take a little bit more accountability in terms of making sure their service is up and running. And one of the other things we're doing is re-reviewing releases. Now, this isn't going back to change freeze. We haven't done that. We've said if it's going to drive trade or revenue or value, or it's going to increase stability of performance, absolutely, let's do it. But all we've done, and we've given the responsibility and accountability to the individual teams to decide for themselves. And we've said, look, if you've got a change you're putting in, and if you think it's something foundational that might be beneficial for post-peak, just think twice, just review it and decide whether it has to go in. And if you still want to put it in, that's absolutely fine. But we have been pushing them to try and be a little bit more mindful in that, because lockdowns, you know, have changed our customer shopping habits. So we typically historically do 2.5 billion in revenue. That's out there in the public domain. That was about 45% of our trade. This year, most of our peak trade will be digital because Black Friday was fully digital. and that's about 65-70% more orders year on year, and that's a lot in terms of having the website stand up for that. And we don't expect that to go back either. We don't think those numbers will return to where they were. Our chairman, Sharon White, she was on record as saying actually she thinks that now the vast majority of our trade for the future will be digital. So 2020 has genuinely accelerated the profile of the shopping habits within our entire business. And the good news is the exec aren't worried. I mean, they still dropped in to our virtual war room on Black Friday and they still showed notice, but it wasn't with anxiety, it was just for camaraderie. And I think, you know, as some of the stats that Alex is showing is, you know, it's expected now that the website will just cope for this. I was speaking to somebody who's been at John Lewis longer than I have, who's worked with us, and he was saying, you know, years ago, as in sort of like recent history, so less than 10 years ago, when we were putting ATG in, we had every 2 weeks we'd have a meeting with the MD, and there was a huge program of work around it, and it was seen as a really important, crucial thing. For the replatforming we're doing at the moment and all the work we're doing, there are no meetings with senior leaders. We don't have steering groups. We're just trusted to get on with it. We're replatforming what will be a £3 billion website. No one minds. Everyone expects it will be successful. And I think in terms of a short period of time, those kind of numbers are great. But in terms of the experience and how it feels on the ground to the people working in it, that level of trust has been earned. And I think that's really a testament to how we've been successful in what we've achieved so far. But, you know, but we're not done. With that trade comes a more investment that's needed. And Sandra is going to talk to you a little bit more about that level of investment now and what the future holds.
I'm going to cover this fairly quickly because I want to leave a little bit of room for the Q&A at the end, and I think it's roughly an hour, this piece. But so first of all, I think for us, there's going to be a lot of challenges for us in digital and with our engineering community, so with our product engineers. We are expecting 500 million sort of investment over the next 5 years. That's in both brands, in digital for Waitrose and John Lewis. So there is lots of change coming, basically. In order to really look at that and move into delivering against that, we think that we'll probably be scaling around 50% in 21. And really to support those new customer journeys and that move to digital that we have really seen that Christian was talking about. But scaling is difficult. It's not, you know, we can't just open the doors and go, I'll tell you what, we'll set up another 20 teams, it'll all be good, or however many we want to go for. We have to be really inventive with our team formation. We have to really understand, where do we want to involve our suppliers? They are really important to us. The relationships that we have, particularly with people like EE, we very much treat them as we would our partners. We have very supportive teams, and they really help us with our upskilling of our partners and all the work that we do. So treating everybody as one team is really important to the partnership, and is the big basis of working with us. So where do we bring our suppliers in? What skills do we need for them to help us with? And which ones do we continue to build and work on with our partners so that we get that best of both worlds? How do we make that work better? So all of those types of things are the things that Christian and I are going to be discussing and working on over the next few months. We're also recruiting some new partners as well. In fact, we've got some adverts going out this week. But again, it's getting that balance right. We've done a lot of work in this space because we moved roughly 3 years ago. We had a massive move of skills in our partner base. And we've really moved to having a lot more of the decisions at the actual local level. So less handoffs and moving things such as solution architecture work. I'm going to have to cough. I'm sorry. Hold on. Apologies. So it's really about moving those decisions into the right places, and one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the next few months is moving more of that solution architecture work formally into the product engineering roles. So briefly going to touch on remote working. I'm sure many of you are still doing that. In the partnership, we're still doing remote working. We've had, if you had told me how successful it would be, I would never have believed you before we had to do this in March. It's been a massive success for us. I'm not saying that for everyone, they have all loved it, because obviously not everybody has the right support network at home or the ability to do that. And we do actually have our head offices, both of them, the one in Bracknell and in Victoria, are both open. And if people want to work in their offices, they can actually book spaces in there and do that. And weirdly enough, they get free food if they do that as well. So there's an added benefit for actually going into the office. But we don't know exactly how that's going to work going forward. We know that we're going to keep a lot of that flexibility. We know that we're not going to be expecting people to come into the office 5 days a week. But there is something about getting that optimum balance in there. What is it? There are times when it is really good for everyone to get together, teams forming, and there are times when actually it's great, as we're doing now when we're all working remotely. But there's a lot that's all being discussed currently, and we'll be coming back to talk about how we'll manage that in the new year. So the technical profession was formed about 4 or 5 months ago, and it was pulling together all of the product engineers, so all of the specialisms, whether that's analysis or software engineers or data or anything, into one profession. And by doing that, we've also pulled in everybody from because it's matrix management, we've pulled in everybody from the Waitrose and John Lewis together, and that's been actually very inspiring. We've enabled a lot greater sharing. We've got improved communities. We're getting less siloed engineering and tech decisions across the two brands. It really has been an amazing experience. We've got a lot more to do. Let's be clear, we're nowhere near. I'm not sure there is a finish line, but anyway, we've got a lot more to do. Checking the time, I'm going to speed up. Skills focused on some of the normal things you'd expect, microservices, obviously, Kotlin, Java, Swift, React, JavaScript. None of those are surprises. Data platform, platform data, all of the things that you'd expect for any digital site to really be interested in. I'm going to stop because I could just keep going on this for a long time, but I'm going to hand on quickly to Alex, who's got the last slide before the Q&A.
Thanks, Sandra. I'll try and rattle through it because I can see some really interesting questions. Yeah, so we're certainly continuing to develop on our platform. I talked earlier about it being a product in its own right. We have tons of ideas, even though I said, we think it's really good and we're really pleased with it. We always have ideas to make it better. There's tons of really interesting work we could be doing, some of which I've hinted at on this slide. It's still a small team. There's always, more we could be doing to help our partners, help our employees skill up. And we're very grateful to the likes of EE, who bring some external critical thinking specialism. We value their involvement in this stuff really, really highly. They're terrific. There's tremendous demand coming in to sort of preempt one of the questions that's on the list. Yeah, we still have our monolith. It's still used for some things. It's an ongoing piece of work that is trying to gradually break that down, gradually strangle it. And we know about some of that work that's coming. We don't worry about that. We don't worry about more teams. We don't worry about more services coming onto the platform because we're really confident in its ability to scale. That said, we know that some of those services that are coming on have some interesting requirements that we're going to have to solve for, particularly around security. So there's some interesting technical challenges to come that sort of could clash against some of the sort of early design decisions that we took. It's going to be an interesting one. And sort of on that operability theme, build it, run it. That sense of responsibility for teams is new to some. Not every team is going, woohoo, I'm going on call. And there's always more we could be doing there to help them feel comfortable and want to be saying, woohoo, I'm going on call, because I'm not going to get called because I've designed my service really well. And it's not going to fail, or when it does, I know exactly what I'm going to do, because everything fails. So there's certainly that angle to it as well. There's a little chart there that shows how the world has changed in terms of the rate of deployments that we see, ever increasing. 2020 stats, not counting November and December, so it's still rising. And then I've sort of hinted at some of the bigger ticket stuff that we've not tackled on the platform yet that we're now thinking about, because we've got to the level of complexity that some of these things start to become a bit more relevant to us, like should we be deploying a service mesh because our services are more complicated and more distributed, and then the value of having something like that to help us understand and reason about and do interesting things with that traffic. Should we be doing things in a bit more resilient fashion, even though that comes with a bunch of complexity, because the platform is large enough now that our ability to rebuild it somewhere else is more time consuming. So there's things like that in the mix as well. I've tried to go as fast as I possibly could through that slide so that we can go straight on to Q&A.
Great, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Christian and Sandra. That was a fantastic talk. So much great content and so many good questions that's prompted. So we need to finish at 7, but we're going to try and run through now as many of those questions as we can. So the first most voted question was from Thomas. Based on what you have learned so far while building a new platform, is there anything in particular that you would have done differently in hindsight?
It's probably one for you, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, slightly flippantly, no. I'm relatively happy with the big ticket stuff. That said, the true answer to that is there's always things that you think, oh, in hindsight, that technical decision, that thing that we've built, we've taken on some tech debt there that was bigger than we realized. I wish we'd done this slightly differently. I guess my broad comment on that would be what I think we are good at is identifying, our engineers feel empowered. I hope it certainly seems to me that they are, that they think, well, this is not a good idea. We should have done it like this. And we'll capture that. We'll create stories out of it. We'll progress it. Our PO is good at recognizing the need to do those things and not, charge straight into new stuff all the time, would be my reflection. I think also there's a thing around how what we call the platform boundary, what we do and what our product teams have to do themselves is something that's always been a difficult line to find. Sort of finding that right balance of what is sort of within the product team's gift to do what they want, and whether we need to be stronger on certain things is a constant thing that we wrestle with.
Great, thanks, Alex. Okay, let's move on to the next one from Ben White. Do all of your microservices own their own data, or are they still communicating with legacy data systems? What's the strategy used in order to achieve the move away from legacy data?
So
no, all right, go on.
You crack on, but let me answer, and then you can correct me. So no, they don't. Is the short answer. So we have it's a mix. So we have some of them have abstracted their own data out into their own service to make it so they've got it highly responsive and there if they need it. Some still have to go through our middleware to go and get data from other systems, and some do still have to rely on ATG because there's some functionality and capability we just haven't migrated away from yet. And some are in a transitional state, like our product catalog, where we've got a lot of some of our product data available, and that's feeding some of the other services. And then we have ATG and other things like our PIM doing some other. So it's a real mix. The strategy really, and we've got at the moment is just is a migration one. So it is moving away from ATG, and we have other legacy systems around it. And we have another legacy, actually the original before ATG platform, still providing some of our systems of record that we'll tackle at some point beyond that. But yeah, so that's kind of the strategy we've got at the moment, if you can call it that. But Alex, you might want to jump in on that.
That's absolutely spot on. There's a bunch of decisions that go into whether it's right to go and get the legacy data or have a view of it yourselves that you manage, and it's a complicated decision for many teams.
Great, thank you both. Okay, then the next question is a non-technical one. What's the biggest non-technical improvement to how your IT teams have operated over Black Friday and Christmas this year?
This year, yeah. So I don't think you can call it not. I'll give you my view, and then Sandra and Alex can give their own view. I think we all have a different one. So for me, I don't think you call it non-technical. I think we've used, because it is fundamentally technical, but I think we've used this type of format, video calling, really effectively. And it's allowed people to be able to, we haven't been limited by, like, how many people can get in a meeting room, stuff like that, which is a constraint, right? So that has been really, really useful, in the ability to be able to get people to collaborate without having to hunt them down on different floors, find out where they are. That's also been really, really useful.
I would add on to that the confidence people feel now in being able to work remotely and to actually follow up on any issues and to reach people, much as Christian said, it has really, really improved those relationships and the ability of people to work where it suits them. So that has been the big thing, I think, confidence.
And I would emphasize the build it, run it stuff, and talk about the fact that teams, promoting that sense of ownership, and that each team, each service needs to think about how their particular stuff that they're responsible for behaves under these kind of conditions, has made it much easier. We don't have to get those big groups of people together, or it doesn't become an ops problem. Has been really powerful.
Great, thank you. So a combination of making it easier to collaborate, but also higher ownership within individual teams. It's certainly been much easier not needing to hunt around for a meeting room anymore. Okay, then the next question from Stuart Abel. This one is aimed at Alex. You mentioned the first component to begin with the new approach was the UI, or the front end, and that had some ongoing benefits. I think you're talking about browse. How did you choose that as the first component to start improving? And what was the things you did at the beginning to build it from scratch?
Yeah, okay. I'll do my best to answer this. A lot of the work that happened on this didn't involve me. But I'll take a swing at it. The reason it was prioritized was largely because of that slow release process. So if you think about, what is the business going to want to change the most? The look and feel, what they see on the site. That's the stuff that changes frequently. That's the stuff that differentiates us. So the first thing that they wanted to chop out of ATG in the first place was always going to be the thing that is right in front of the customer. So the work to create a new version of that, to take that out of ATG, started a year or two before the platform. And cloud was a thing then, so the engineers working on that were thinking about this stuff already, with a plan to what would have been running on IaaS type platforms at that point, but effectively they wanted to be able to run it on the cloud back then. We piggybacked on that. We totally piggybacked on that because we knew it would work. So we deliberately picked that out and said, we know this is going to be successful. We're not going to try and deal with rewriting part of ATG at the same time as deploying something to cloud. We'll take a thing that is constrained. We can't scale it. It's awkward. We still need to go and build VMs to do stuff with it. But we're confident we'll be able to make it work. But yeah, it was effectively business-led decision to prioritize that, and then we knew that we could make sensible technology choices off the back of the work that had already happened.
Great, thank you, Alex. And we'll move on to one from John Dickinson. So similar question, but kind of more focused on conversion. So how do you decide what changes to your site to make to improve conversion? Because I can imagine there's a whole raft of things you could do, but are you specifically looking at conversion metrics?
Yeah, so it generally it will come from three sources predominantly. So we have a product team that sits alongside everything we do technically. So they'll obsess over value, and conversion. Value comes from conversion, and so they sit there and spend their entire time thinking about it. And so some of the things we've done before, in terms of, we had quite a clunky offering around sofas, and we had quite a clunky offering around made-to-measure blinds, and so we took those out as separate apps, and we created specific journeys around them as separate apps. And so they look at that because they know that in the A/B testing they're done and going into stores around it, they could see that would lead to high conversion. We also have a team that looks at customer feedback, so things that they think in terms of stuff that's frustrating, causing friction on the site, that might be causing issues, and we bring that in as well. That goes into those backlogs as well, in order to say actually what is getting in the way of people converting. And it's like, if there's a specific thing around add to basket that's causing a problem, or we look at how we can make non-linear journeys around those things as well, because that's really good at driving conversion. And then we have the third thing we look at is obviously again around that friction. The Sonic team, for example, look at the makeup of the site and think about what is actually slowing it down and what is causing things to render maybe more slowly and causing people to have drop out of that journey maybe earlier than they might. And so we have all those things as inputs. So there's not, those things are decided, and then the product team will take all of those, the product owner will take all of those things and make the right decision, usually.
Great. That sounds like a really efficient way of prioritizing things and keeping the product teams, close to the engineering kind of side of things. And a question on kind of failure. And so, how do your teams prepare for the impact of unforeseen, multiple, or cascading failures? It sounds like you had kind of very few things to worry about this year, but how do your teams prepare for things that they're not going to expect? So, for instance, a third-party service starts having high latency at the same time as several of your instances start failing.
I'll take that one. Hot topic at the moment. So we have benefited, I suppose, earlier on in the platform from the fact that there's not actually that much, or there wasn't, I should say, that much interconnectedness. So most services had a good understanding of what their up and downstream dependencies were and could manage those accordingly. And you would use sort of traditional operability techniques for that sort of thing, bulkheads, caching, circuit breakers, that kind of stuff. What we've seen more lately, as we've started to have a bit more of that kind of east-west traffic and interconnectedness of things that has emerged over this year, I suppose, is that this is hard, and we've learned that this is hard. Things, there's kind of an approach element to this where we talk about it more. We're spinning up communities to discuss and learn from these kind of events, and then there's a technology response to that as well. So do we have the right tooling? Are we making available easily through our standard dashboards, or cultivating the idea of creating these more customized dashboards that are more relevant to your service? I alluded to service mesh as an example of something that unlocks some benefit here. Distributed tracing tools, things like that. These are the kind of things that we're talking about at the moment, particularly because we're seeing that more like this kind of problem than we have previously. So not a perfect world, not perfect setup for us, an area we're learning and working on.
Great, thanks for that, Alex. Okay, we'll move on to one from Oopsie Javid. During the discovery or exploration phase, and we're moving to the modern platform, how did you position the desire to move to the cloud with senior management, senior stakeholders? How do you convince them that this move is the right thing to do?
Take that one if you'd like.
You do it, and then I'll add a bit in. I think I've got to drop out in a minute, probably after this question, Lindsay. By the way, so it's fine. But got another call. But
okay,
you go for Alex, and I'll add something in.
All right, cool. Yeah. So we started with the business. And said, look, we know that it's frustrating you, that it takes a long time for us to spin up new infrastructure, to roll out the kind of changes that you want to see, that you want to scale digital, you're investing in it. And we think that the platforms that we offer currently are holding you back, and we think there's a better way. So, and they were very fully bought into that. They'd seen the pain of some of this for a while. Having that initial business engagement, that business buy-in was incredibly useful when we then went to talk to IT stakeholders and say, we're changing the way we do this, and we're going to demonstrate what we think is a better way. It was treated as an experiment. It was treated as a thing where we will prove this to you, and we did that. An example of the kind of compromises we made in order to make that happen was we accepted that we couldn't revolutionize everything. We kept some of the industrialized tooling, the enterprise tooling that we used for our data centers in the initial incarnation of the platform to say, look, we've not touched that stuff, so you can see that it's performing better or performing the same if that's what we needed it to do. You can get all the same visibility of stuff that you need to, and then later on we then revolutionize that. So we made some compromises. We ticked the appropriate boxes to help it land with those stakeholders and effectively bring them on the journey to realizing that this was actually, cost effective, flexible, scalable, etc., etc.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd echo everything that Alex has said. I think it was also benefited. I think the word experimentation is really powerful in getting licensed to be able to go and do stuff that otherwise make people uncomfortable. It's really hard for someone to turn around and go, no, I don't want you to experiment. But I think singing with one voice on this was really, really powerful. So we've done a big piece of work leading up to this that Sandra actually led on around organizational agility, and one of the themes around that was about empowering people closest to the work to make their own decisions. And so, one of the things we were able to do is leverage that in order to be able to get our senior stakeholders within the product world, within the technology delivery world, and within the ops world to come together to see the benefit. And when you've got those three people walking into a room with the MD saying, this is something we need to do, yes, it's a risk, there's a risk associated to it, but it's the right risk, it's an understood and measured risk. The answer is usually a very straightforward conclusion at that point.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to draw to a close there. Thank you so much to everyone for their questions. I hope you've all found it a really useful session. A massive thank you to Sandra, Alex and Christian for sharing their expertise with us today. There's been so much fascinating content. I had one last question for you, May. You mentioned that in the new year you're going to be looking for more partners to join John Lewis and Partners. Is there anywhere people should kind of send their CVs or get in contact with you if they're interested in working with you?
Yep, it comes up on is it JLP Jobs? Is that the site?
Yeah.
I'm looking at yeah, JLP Jobs. They'll be appearing on there by the end of hopefully by the end of tomorrow.
Great.
Or send it to sandra.christie@johnlewis.com.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. You're just trying to flood my inbox. Definitely don't do that. JLP
Definitely
Jobs.
the website.
Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic talk. So that's the last talk of the year. In the new year, Expert Talks Online will be returning on January the 13th. I'm going to have a guest speaker called Dr. Monica Sumra, and she's a senior business anthropologist. Monica is going to be talking to us about remote leadership in a COVID-19 world. She'll be covering questions such as, what does leadership look like in a remote working environment? How do we foster trust, build relationships and maintain cohesion? And how do we remain efficient? And you can sign up for this talk now on equalexperts.com. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you for John Lewis for joining us this evening, and thank you for everyone that's come in and asked questions and listened. I hope you all have a good rest of your day and a safe end to your year.